Hey guys, what's up? So we've got some more cards that have come out from the pack that's supporting the Jim Crocodile Cook's Fossil Warrior deck, which is actually quite decent. And we're getting quite a lot of his anime cards now, including a lot of fusion monsters. So let's get started. We have Weathering Soldier in Tag Force, which was if anyone doesn't know, it's a PSP game that was I think it had there were about 4 or 5 of them made. The first 3 were GX based, the other 2 were 5Ds based, and some of these cards were actually made into even if they were only anime limited, they were actually made into the game. This is a level 4 Earth Rock effect monster with 2000 attack and 1200 defense. You can use the first effect with this card's name only once per turn. If this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, or if this card is destroyed by battle, you can add from your deck to your hand either 1 Fossil Fusion, or 1 card that specifically lists Fossil Fusion in its text, except Weathering Soldier, and 2 once per turn during your end phase. This card loses 600 attack. So this card is a little bit of a beta, just temporarily. The first effect is a search effect for your Fossil Fusion or similar cards to it, which isn't a bad thing. The whole aspect of having these types of cards means that you're able to get to your key cards a lot faster. The second effect, with it losing attack points during each turn, means it's more susceptible to be destroyed by battle. But that's the whole point of it anyway. If you're running this, I would run it as maybe 1 or 2 of, because the chances are it's going to be used. You've got to be able to get your fusion cards a lot more easily. I would make up just a couple of other points. If you see just above where Weathering Soldier is, there are 3 names on there. Fossil Warrior Skull King, so this shows that this pack is supporting the Fossil Warrior cards. So that's Jim Cook's cards. Number C1, Numeron Chaos Gate Sunya. This was actually used by the final villain within the it was within Yu-Gi-Oh! Zeal, and he used the chaos numbers and the very beginning numbers. Yeah, his name was Don Thousand. He was the one responsible for creating the 7 emperors, 7 Varian emperors, who were originally, just a spoiler if you don't know, they were originally human within parts of history, and they had been mind controlled into believing they were something different, and they were manipulated by him. And we also have a Pliant-Seer Socket Troll. This was used by a character also within Yu-Gi-Oh! Zeal. It was Caswell Francis, who was one of Yuma's classmates. He didn't really have that much of a role within the series. If anything, he tended just to be more of a side character. He didn't really have much in the aspect of any sort of dueling, except for he had a duel with Quattro, along with Kronk. No, so it was Bronk, where they tag teamed against Quattro, and they were both beaten by his gimmick puppet deck. So the next card is our Fossil Knight Skull Knight, Fossil Warrior Skull Knight, as it's more likely to be known. This is a level 6 Earth Rock Fusion effect monster with 2,400 attack and 1,100 defense, and it requires you to 1 rock monster and 1 level 5 or level 6 monster. It must be special summoned with Fossil Fusion, and you can only use the third effect with this card's name once per turn. So the first effect is, if this card attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage. Second, when this attacking card destroys a monster in battle, you can activate this effect. This card can attack once again in a row. And the third effect is, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 monster on the field and destroy that monster. So the first and second effects are the same as the Fossil Knight Skull King. So there's nothing really that much different. But the third effect is where it's slightly different. Being able to destroy an opponent's monster isn't a bad thing, especially if this card's already gotten rid of. Its summoning requirement is by Fossil Fusion, but even if you've not got Fossil Fusion in your hand, you've got other cards which are supporting and searching for these cards, so it's not too bad. The only issue would be trying to get your opponent to have a level 5 or a level 6 monster. So it's very much dependent on what your opponent is running. If they're not running any monsters of those levels, you're not going to really get this card out by the original Fossil Fusion. But we also have Time Stream, which is a bit later on, which can help to bring this card out. So the next card is Fossil Knight Skullpawn. This is a level 4 Earth Rock Fusion effect monster with 2,000 attack and 800 defense, and it requires 1 rock monster and 1 level 4 or lower monster. It must first be special summoned with Fossil Fusion, and you can use the second effect with this card's name only once per turn. Its first effect is, this card can make up to 2 attacks on monsters during each battle phase, and 2, you can banish this card from your graveyard to add 1 Time Stream from your deck to your hand. So this is the weakest of the fusion monsters Jim Cook used, and it's the simplest to summon because your opponent is going to have lower level monsters in their graveyard, which you can use to bring this out immediately. The first effect is a bit more restricted than either of the other Fossil Knight monsters, because these attacks can only be made on monsters. So if your opponent only has the 1 monster, that's all you can go up against. The ability to search for its second effect is quite decent, because Time Stream is that other card I was mentioning that can be treated as Fossil Fusion. So you can it supports the deck a lot easier. The next card we've got is Fossil Dragon Scoliosis. This is a level 8 Earth Rock Fusion effect monster with 3,500 attack and 0 defense, and it requires 1 rock monster and 1 level 7 or higher monster in your opponent's graveyard. It must first be special summoned with Fossil Fusion. Its first effect is, if this card battles an opponent's monster before damage calculation, you can switch the current attack and defense of that opponent's monster until the end of the damage step. 2. If this card attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage. And 3. Double any battle damage that your opponent takes from battles involving their monster and this fusion summoned card. So this is kind of like it's not his main boss monster. He tends to go more into Skull King, but this is the most powerful monster that he has in his arsenal. The requirements on this card are not too bad. Your opponent will likely be running some high level monsters, so it's not too difficult to bring out. But it does stipulate that you have to use your opponent's graveyard for that level 7 or higher monster. this is in keeping with the effect when he was dueling against against Hasselbury within the 3rd season of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, as he used one of his, I think he used his ultimate Tyranno, which was in the graveyard to bring this out. The switching attack and defense is not a bad effect because most likely your opponent is going to use the battle position with the strongest stat line. So if you change, and a lot of monsters don't have balanced attack and defense, ironically, the same refers to this. If your opponent was to have this card on their field as well, and it was their turn, you'd be taking 7,000 points of damage because of the 3rd effect on this card. The piercing battle damage is just so that you can use a double effect damage, double the battle damage from the 3rd effect. So this is just trying to make the card make a little bit more sense. And always doubling battle damage is decent. There's not that many cards around there that use it. You've got the Chaos Max Dragon for the Blue Eyes archetype, but other than that, there's nothing I can really say of cards that do the same kind of thing. And you've got Fossil Dragon Skullgar, which is also a level 4 Earth Rock fusion effect monster with 2,500 attack and 0 defense. This requires a rock monster and 1 level 4 or lower monster in your opponent's graveyard, and it must be first special summoned with Fossil Fusion. You can use the 2nd effect with this card's name only once per turn. Its first effect is if this card attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage, and 2, you can banish this card from your graveyard to add 1 Fossil Fusion from your deck to your hand. This is better than the other level 4 fusion monster because it has a higher attack stat line. It's just going to be a lot more useful, and your opponent is going to have the requirements to allow you to go into this card just as easily. The piercing battle damage effect is consistent with most of them anyway, so it doesn't really do much for you. It's just getting a bit more damage on board. The 2nd effect to search for your Fossil Fusion is consistent with how the deck wants to run. Bringing your Fossil Fusion to your hand as quickly as possible is the best way to meet your win condition. Now here is the card we've been waiting for. This is Time Stream. It is a normal spell card that says target 1 Fossil Fusion monster you control, tribute that monster, and if you do, special summon from your extra deck 1 Fossil Fusion monster that is 2 levels higher than the attributed monster's original level. This is treated as a fusion summon with Fossil Fusion. And 2, during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish both this card and 1 Fossil Fusion monster from your graveyard, then target 1 Fossil Fusion monster in your graveyard to special summon it. So the first effect works a little bit like the rank up magic card. I think it's Astral Force, which jumps your Xyz monsters by 2 ranks, but this is specific to only the Fossil Fusion monsters. Since they're all either level 4, 6 or 8, this means you're bringing out either the level 6s or the level 8s, which is quite decent considering that in the anime, when Jim Cook used this spell, you had to pay half your life points, so at least this doesn't really have a cost attached to it. It doesn't say you're restricted to going into Fossil Fusion monsters for the rest of the turn, or that you're limited to only summoning rocks for the rest of the turn. So that if the duel has been going on for a little while and you draw into this, you've got a little bit more of a win condition with this card. The 2nd effect of this card is also useful because most spells these days run a couple of effects, including a graveyard effect, just to make them a little bit more viable. To bring back one of your Fossil Fusion monsters, it means that you're recovering your resources more quickly, and more likely to win the duel in that respect. And the next card is Specimen Inspection. This is a normal spell card. You can activate only one card with this card's name per turn. Reveal one Fossil Fusion in your hand. Send one monster from your hand to the graveyard. And if you do, declare one monster type and level. And if you do that, your opponent sends one monster of the declared type and level from their hand or deck to the graveyard, if any. So the whole point of this card is to get the cards necessary into the graveyard for you to go into using your Fossil Fusion. This is just about setting up to bring out your fusion monsters. So if you can get your opponent into having a level 7 or higher monster go to the graveyard, you can bring out your boss monsters that much easier. The only gamble is you kind of need to wait until you know what your opponent is running. And it's like most games of Yu-Gi-Oh! If you have more knowledge on how some of these decks work, of course, with 10,000 cards, you can't know every card. But if you generally know how their archetype works, or what the traditional builds of that particular deck are, you know what the key cards within that deck are. You can say, for example, Thunder Dragon, you could say level 5 Thunder Dragon, level 5 Thunder Monster. Then they'd have to discard their Thunder Dragon to the graveyard. You could bring out the Skull Knight that much easier. It's a decent card, and it's kind of necessary to run, and it avoids you having to run other cards which force your opponent to kind of discard. And the last card we have is Miracle Rupture. This is a normal spell card, and its effect is you can activate only one card with this card's name per turn. Send one level 4 or lower rock monster from your deck to the graveyard. Then if Fossil Fusion is in your graveyard, draw one card. The point of this is just kind of like, it's both a search, it helps you get rid of a card to the graveyard, and is able to let you draw into a card, so perhaps you draw into another Fossil Fusion, or you draw into one of your key cards, and then it kind of helps you to accelerate the deck a little bit. It helps you to deck thin as well, and pitching cards means that if you do go into Fossil Fusion, you're more likely to be able to use it that much quicker. What do you guys think of the brand new support? Is this something you like? Do you think you'll be running his deck? And what cards would you have paired with his current support in order to make the deck work as effectively as possible? Leave your comments down below, like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe.